Hello, everyone. Welcome to CPC Majors Weeks 2 and 3 Power Rankings. My name is Jason, aka BaconChest, and I'm here with my co-host, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jmac, coach of the Waterloo Weaviles in the D League. I apologize for missing last week's recording, but I'm looking forward to making them for the rest of the.
Yeah, it should be good. So we're going to briefly power through our Week 2 rankings. Obviously, these are a little bit out of date now, but it does give you some idea of, sort of how we saw those Week 2 games, and then moving into Week 3, obviously there's going to be a lot of changes from the Week 1 rankings, so it sort of gives you a bit of an idea as to what has happened in the meantime. So, these are our Week 2 rankings. This is the 16 through to 9 teams. Um, as you can see, our rankings are becoming a lot more similar as the weeks go on. There's still a few differences here, but I mean, I think our top 8 and our bottom 8 are the same. I don't think any teams are. Yeah.
They're pretty close.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like our top 8 is set and our bottom 8 is set. At this point, and then yep, you can also see our top 8s. Um, yeah, not much difference at the top. Probably, yeah, I guess the main difference is I rated Sykes' performance a little better, and you rated Evans' performance a little better. That's probably the main difference, but aside from that, it's very similar.
Right. Yeah, I didn't think Psych had that great of a week 2 match. He might have haxed a little bit from what I'm recalling. So I think he should have lost that game. I think it was against Will. So
Um, oh, no. So it wasn't so much hacks in that game, but that was the game against Will where Will didn't know that he had Cresselia. Which obviously isn't Sykes'
right.
fault, and I do think that Syke played really well and set up the Cresselia to win the game. So it was kind of, to me, I sort of felt like he could only play what he was put up against, and what he was put up against couldn't beat Cresselia. um, yeah, like obviously, therefore, I didn't punish Will too hard for that, because there was a little bit of a mix up with the dock not being fully updated. But on the other hand, I did feel like Psych actually did play the game quite well overall. So yeah, good game, and I do think those kind of, whilst the top 3 there were pretty solid. I think the 4 through 8 was pretty close. Um, but yeah, we'll see how it looks now moving into week 3. So at number 16, we have Jersey Pursuit, coached by KHD. Uh, you had them at 16 from week 2. I moved them down to 16 this week. Um, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about KHD. What do you have on the Jersey Pursuit?
I think he had a lot of trouble this week overall. Um, he didn't really have many switch-ins to a sub-toxic Raikou. I believe that Raikou was able to put in a lot of work
Mm-hmm.
against KHD, as he didn't have proper recovery or options to remove status conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like he was definitely weakened in the early game by
Mm-hmm.
that Raikou, and was definitely. But he did kind of turn it around later in the game with Volt Turn, and so I will talk more about Barigo's performance when we get to him, but I don't think KHD had much going for him other than the Life Orb Stoutland.
Yeah, and he did put in a bit of work with that Stoutland. I think the main issue, or there were two main issues I identified. One was that this team just looks so vulnerable to any opposing Choice Scarfer, um, and it just makes it so hard to I don't think there's necessarily great defensive switch-ins unless you are bringing all the Pokemons on the team. But in that case, the other thing was that a lot of I think there were two of the Pokemon, so I think both the Rotom and it might have been the Hippowdon as well, both got toxic early in the game, and that really limited their longevity, especially when you've got sand chipping away at the Rotom that you're providing from your own team. So yeah, I feel like the longevity isn't there, and the bulk isn't there to take on opposing choice scarfers. So it's a real problem for this team, and I don't really know how he's going to fix it. in the long term. But yeah, like certainly, this is actually this roster is slightly out of date in that the Celestealer is now the Z captain. So I am really happy that he switched it over from Azumarill to Celesteal. Although that said, I have to go up against this team for week 4, so I am like, oh okay, now it's suddenly a lot more threatening. But from a power ranking perspective, obviously, good to see that the team is moving towards being slightly more efficient. But yeah, may need to pull some more transactions or may need to rethink the way that he builds in order to start picking up some wins.
Yeah, like I think like even having something like Azu and Latios just to break so that something like the Lycanroc Dusk or the Mega Beedrill can just clean, or even a offensive Celesteal in the late game. Like there are just different options that KHD could bring that I don't believe we've seen yet this season. So I believe that there are ways to improve from a team building standpoint.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's move on to our number 15. And it is our number 15. We both have the Kentucky Fried Dragons, coached by Muse the Best. I moved them down 2, you moved them down 1. So this is, I think, the only other 0-3 team at this point, because we did have, we have one game that hasn't been played for week 3. We'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, Muse copped another big L, this time to Scoot, who was another team that hadn't won a game up to this point, so that also kind of played into moving them down to number 15, at least from my perspective. I thought that the big thing here was that the Megazard X was able to sweep through Muse's team, and I just felt like, one, he kind of played around it a lot with the Finny. Like, he tried to sort of finesse around it in a way that I feel like you just kind of have to attack. You have to click buttons. You have to just make sure that that thing isn't going to kill your entire team. And I think he acknowledged that in the actual battle. He sort of got to the point where it was just Zardex was just clicking buttons to finish off the game, and he was like, maybe I should have just attacked. And then the other thing I felt was that he did have the Thundy set up when the Zardex came in. I was surprised then that the Thunders didn't have anything to take on the Zardex. So, if you're going to try and build a setup sweeper to break through your opponent's team, having something for your opponent's most potent setup sweeper to stop it from counter sweeping you seems fairly logical to me. Unfortunately, he didn't have that, and it, I think, in the end cost him the game. Ironically, that his best chance to win the game with the Thunderous ended up actually costing him in the end. How did you feel about this one?
He had nothing for Zardex. Like, even setting up in the face of a Tapu Fini, a Pokemon that has 2 excellent stab typings in Water and Fairy that can hit Fire and Dragon, like that's neutral damage that Muse the Best can do against Scoot. But there was one part of the game where he clicked sub against the Charizard X and then clicked Calm Mind when I believe it was Flare Blitz or Thunder Punch that was doing at least 52%. So I don't know why he would try and set up in the face of that.
Yeah, the Calm Mind was definitely the wrong play, and I mean, it definitely should have been a Haze Tapu Fini in this matchup. Like, you're up against the Zardex, it's one of the most threatening setup sweepers in the format. Scoot has really good removal, so you can't necessarily guarantee that you're going to keep hazards on the field. You need a way to guaranteed stop that thing from being able to kill your entire team. You're probably going to have to sack a Mon to it, maybe even 2 Mons to it at some point in the game. But if you can at least guarantee that it's not going to be at +1/+1, then you at least are giving yourself a chance. And I don't think that Muse did that in this game, and that's probably why I've got him down at 15, is I don't think he gave himself the best chance to actually pull out a win, even though I think his team is still pretty good and could have had a chance to win this game.
Yeah, like he just didn't give himself the option, like at all. Like he had a couple of cool niche brings. Like he had an Adrenaline Orb Necrozma for taking advantage of the Landorus T, which was interesting. He had his Persian click Icy Wind on turn 1 against the Lando T, which missed, which unfortunately, I believe that would have did a lot of damage to the Landorus overall. But I don't believe it mattered too much in the grander scheme of things, just because the Zardax was free to click buttons and win the game for Scoot.
Yeah, definitely. Alright, so yeah, that's about it for Muse. Let's move on to number 14. So this is your number 14, my number 13. Burigo, coach of the Intermalantic FC, has moved off the bottom of the power rankings after picking up his first win. And yeah, I thought there were a few cool things that I noticed here. The first is that he learnt from his week 1 game, where he played really recklessly with Hydreigon and lost to Crawdaunt sweeping in the endgame, where Hydreigon was the only thing stopping that Crawdaunt. This week he was able to keep the Hydreigon healthy throughout the game, which enabled it to be a defensive check, as well as piling on offensive pressure throughout the battle, which was really good, especially in conjunction with the fact that he was able to bring the Z Charge Beam, which was just some real good tech. Obviously is great for the two big things on his opponent's roster that actually dealt with Hydreigon, namely the Celesteela and the Azumarill. Having something that can actually offensively threaten both of those mons was really clever. So yeah, bravo in that prep. Wish passed around quite effectively. And in the end, really, yeah, it was quite a comfortable victory in that, he didn't even really show half his mons. It was just kind of Hydreigon clicked buttons, Vaporeon Wish passed, and that was basically it. So yeah, I thought this was a pretty impressive performance, and yeah, I was definitely willing to reward someone who seemed to have learnt a little bit about what the limitations of his team was, and it showed in terms of improved play. What did you think about Burigo's performance?
So you mentioned earlier with KHD that his team was definitely vulnerable to a choice Scarfer. I found it really, really nice that Burigo took advantage of that knowledge and brought Scarf, Porygon Z, which allowed Burigo to pick up 3 kills against KHD. I don't think I liked the Z Charge Beam that much. It missed it on the kill on the Azumarill. He could have brought something maybe a little bit better against one or the other, like maybe a Z Heat Wave for, or a Z Fire Blast for the Celesteela, or a Z Belch for the Azu. It was definitely good coverage to have for both, but I think picking up the kill on something like Azumarill when it can deal a lot of damage back was something that Burigo maybe should have done, just so that the Azumarill couldn't kill his Hydreigon and then get chip with Aqua Jet on something else. But other than that, I think Burigo played very well, pressured KHD immensely, and just took home the win.
Yeah, that's probably fair. That's probably a fair point of criticism, but yeah, I mean, I guess it is. He was kind of going for having a bet each way in terms of which one would come out of the Azu and the Celesteela, but yeah, probably, if we were kind of prepping without knowing what KHD was going to bring, maybe committing to one of those over the other might have been better, but as it stands, worked out pretty well. And yeah, was able to pick up the win. So let's move on to our next coach. This is the Jump City Hitmonlees, coached by Carson. This is my number 14 and your number 12. I might start off on this one. So Carson, I felt, had a really bad game this week, and I do feel like his performances since week 1 have been really poor. He forgot how terrain worked, and tried to Spore on turn 1 against a Tapu Koko, so that was unideal. And obviously happens to everyone at some point that you'll forget a mechanic, but, to have that happen on turn one and really put you back, I just feel was unfortunate. He did put in a bit of work with a cheek pouch Diggersby, which I have never seen anyone do before, and I doubt I will ever see again. But it did put in some work. It was able to, I think, get up spikes at one point, and was able to recover off a lot of damage. So good job in that respect. On the other hand, the Tangerberry on Hooper, when it's 4 times weak and it's so physically frail that it's probably not going to take a U-turn anyway, as became evident in the game where it still died to a U-turn from I think it was still over 50% health at that point, but it still died even with the berry. Seemed a little bit less optimal in terms of prep. The other thing that I think I just kind of punished a little bit in terms of my ranking here was just the fact that he, said in the battle chat, he was like, well, I'm just memeing a bit. And I was like, well, it's week 3. You were 1 win, 1 loss going into this game. Realistically, I don't think you should be memeing in a league like this, at this point of the season. And if you're going to keep doing that, then you're not going to pick up many wins. The games might be entertaining, and the Diggersby was an entertaining set, but yeah, I think in that respect, I was like, okay, well, that kind of downgrades the performance even more for me. I don't know. What did you think about this one?
Definitely forgetting about how electric terrain worked was definitely a giant fault. The Smeargle was level 1, so it was kind of funny to maybe see a fear set come out. But yeah, no, I really liked the memes. It was definitely fun to watch. If you know your opponent is someone of the caliber like Styx, maybe not showing off what you can bring against this week, would maybe help for playoffs if Carson can turn it around. So maybe by bringing all of these memes, Carson gains knowledge from what Styx wanted to bring, and then can maybe work around that later in the season, and not giving up any knowledge to Styx to help him in the playoffs. I think was maybe a little unlucky. He missed a lot of toxics, which lowered the differential by maybe 1 or 2. But yeah, I don't think he played great, but I think I had fun just watching the battle, and maybe that's why I had him maybe a little higher than what I. It was just because it was so enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, certainly if we had an entertainment ranking, this would have been probably the top battle for the week, really. It was very bizarre to watch. Yeah, and I think you make some good points about, potentially if he can pull it back and make it into playoffs, then Styx has no intel about what sets he wants to bring. But, on the other hand, I can't not punish that, really. If you're not going for a win in week 3, you're going to go down the rankings, and that's kind of an indication that you don't feel you're necessarily competitive with the top teams in the league. So, at that point, we're gonna knock you down a bit. But that said, yeah, if he is able to bring it back, goes into playoffs and beats Styx in the first round of playoffs, then I will eat my words, and I'll be very impressed. And I hope it happens with another cheek pouch Diggersby. So, moving on to our next coach, we have the Dayton Dittos, coached by Henry. I have them at number 12, you have them at number 13. For both of us, that's down 2. Why don't you start us off on Henry?
So, I think Henry played the early game very, very poorly. His opponent was able to set up with his Latios to +3 special attack and +3 Spadef with Calm Minds. And that really just put Henry on the back foot early. I think Henry was also maybe a little bit unlucky in the mid game when Blacephalon clicked Will-O-Wisp against Tyranitar, which really neutered the late game because the Tyranitar could still 1v1 his Zapdos, but I think Henry definitely turned it around in the late game with Crawdaunt. I think he has shown Crawdaunt to be an amazing Pokemon throughout CPC majors so far. But overall, I think just the early game plays put him on the back foot, and I think that's what caused him to fall in my rankings for this week.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. And yeah, I think, as you said, the early game was unideal. There were a couple of things I made note of. Firstly, not having Fake Out on the Lopunny was really surprising to me against a Sand team. It just seems like a pretty obvious bring to just stall out Sand turns. So that was a little bit questionable. The other thing was that, yeah, he didn't respect the early setup with the Latias. He brought the Blacephalon in as the Latias went to +1, and then switched it out instead of attacking with the Blacephalon, which, obviously you're predicting your opponent to switch out because Blacephalon threatens Latias so much, but I don't think it necessarily killed a Latias at +1 SpDef at that point. So I guess maybe if you'd been Z, but if you're Z, he outspeeds you and potentially just knocks you out. So yeah, I do think he kind of needed to respect the setup Lati a bit more and just attack it and weaken it and put himself in a position to win the game later on. And in the end, it was in fact the Latias that stopped the Crawdaunt from sweeping. So if he had managed to get a bit more damage off on it, it wouldn't have been able to come in after rocks and then chew an Aquajet at +1, but in the sun, which was what saved volume in the end. I do think he's relying on Crawdaunt a lot, which, he's doing really well with it, but it will become predictable over the course of over the course of the season. And yeah, I would like to see a bit more of mons like Kyurem and offensive Nidoking, and trying to maybe do some more things with Lopunny and Blacephalon, because I think there is quite a lot of offense here. But yeah, it's mostly been focused on Crawdaunt. The last thing is, yeah, he did get a little bit unlucky with the Will-O-Wisp miss on the T-Tar. Not only did that hurt the Zapdos versus T-Tar matchup, it also meant that the Crawdaunt couldn't go to +2/+2 on the T-Tar, because I think it would have died to 2 Earthquakes plus Sand damage. Whereas if he had burnt it earlier in the game, he could have set up to +2/+2, and at that point I think he actually does just sweep through his opponent's team. So yeah, a little bit unlucky, but I do think the early game was really bad, and yeah, that's kind of why he's gone down the rankings a bit. So yeah, let's move on to our next team. So this is the Rhine Valley Guardians, coached by Risepool. So do you want to start us off on Rise?
So I think Rise had a very, very good week. He brought Mega Gardevoir to the game, and Blitz didn't have a switch in to Mega Gardevoir at all. So I think Mega Gardevoir definitely put on the pressure for Blitz throughout the course of the game. I think Risepool had an excellent answer to a Crocoon with Taunt plus sub Keldeo, which definitely stopped it from clicking Rest or Calm Mind. I think that Risepool just had excellent prep throughout the game and just outplayed Blitz for the majority of the game. So I think just overall, Risepool played quite well and played to his outs.
Yeah, I did think he did play quite well. He aggressively brought in the Mega Guard consistently throughout the game. Like, he brought it in on hits, and he even brought it in on super effective hits at points, but it didn't matter because Mega Guard's just got such good natural special bulk that it was able to take things like a Shadow Ball and then still threaten out opposing mons. So that was really good to see. And he lost the Taunty partway through the game, and it seemed at that point when I was watching the replay, I was like, "Ooh, this is really going to go downhill from here for Rise." But he was able to get over that and pull out the win. So yeah, a good game. And yeah, I definitely think these kind of there's like sort of brackets for me where we've had kind of our bottom few, and then now we're in kind of this sort of mid-tier teams that are all around that kind of 1-2 record. And it was very tough for me separating out this team from the next two teams as well. And then I think there's then a bit of a gap, maybe to some of the higher up teams. But that said, I do think if Rise plays a bit more like week 3 and a bit less like weeks 1 and 2, then I think he'll do a lot better moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. Like if you can definitely turn it around. He has played well. It's just he has been kind of getting unlucky bounces here and there that have caused him to lose a couple of games.
Yeah, certainly week 2 he was quite unlucky. Like, missing Heatwave on a Ferrothorn on turn 1 was just so unfortunate to watch. Um, but yeah, so we'll see how he goes moving forward. So moving on, we have myself at number 9 from me and at number 9 from you. So I copped a loss this week to Evan and the Brighton Bewares. So like 2 losses. I've lost both of those games to teams that are in our top half. And yeah, it was a really close game. I was really worried about the matchup because I think Evan's team just has a massive speed tier advantage over mine that was really hard for me to address. I do think Evan and I were talking about it afterwards. I probably could have brought Trick Room on the Reuniclus. I kind of had the move slot there, and that would have potentially given me an out in the late game. But yeah, I thought Evan. Sorry, we're not talking about Evan. We're talking about me. I thought made the right plays for the most part, except for a couple plays in the mid game around the Thunderous. So like not scalding with my Empoleon into the Thunderous was a problem because I needed damage on it so that Scarf Shaman could revenge kill, and then going defog with Empoleon as the Metagross came in and then was able to get up rocks. So in the end, all that happened out of that exchange was that I lost rocks. Was unfortunate, and I think had I gone the other way on those 2 plays, I think I would have had a chance to win the game. I know Evan had a Scarf Transform Mew in the back, so I don't quite. I was trying to figure out how that would have played out depending on what had been alive and what would have actually happened there, but it would have been entertaining to watch at least. But yeah, in the end, it was a 1-0 loss. I end up 1 and 2 with 0 differential. Yeah, not feeling too badly about how the season's going, but obviously 1 and 2 is not where you want to be in terms of an overall record. How did you feel about my performance?
My first line in my notes here is that I'm not 100% sure what to say about the match, other than both coaches played well. The last couple of turns were interesting to me. You had Reuniclus versus Terrakion and Mew.
Yep.
I think clicking Psychic twice on the Terrakion was probably a better play than clicking T-Wave and hoping for the 25% chance that he would get paralyzed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think you played well despite that. In the mid game, Machamp was definitely your best Pokemon this week. I didn't know if you had Bullet Punch on the Machamp, but in the late game, if you had it, I would have clicked it versus the Terrakion just to get the chip for Reuniclus to get the kill.
So the reason why I didn't do that, and I knew exactly what that situation was, and Evan and I talked about it afterwards, and I thought, if I click Bullet Punch here, and he sets up, then that's just 100% game over. And on the other hand, if I click close combat as he sets up, then I win the game. And so that was the key decision there. Was I was like, well, if he sets up here, then I can actually win. Whereas I knew if I click bullet punch, then he would potentially be able to set up and then he would win, or he would kill me and then also be able to do enough damage to the point where Mew would definitely be able to revenge the Reuniclus afterwards. So I was like, alright, let's try and actually go for the win here, rather than go for like getting rid of the Terrakion in front of me. So yeah, I understand that like there are probably merits to both of those plays, and obviously whatever the Mew set was definitely going to make a huge difference to that end game, and I hadn't seen any moves on it yet. But yeah, it was definitely a tight tussle as to which move to click in that situation. But yeah, as it turns out, Bullet Punch plus Psychic definitely would have knocked out the Terrakion, and then I would have had the Reuniclus in. But yeah, as I said earlier, if I'd had Trick Room on that Reuniclus, then yeah, definitely Bullet Punch would have been the play, because then I could have Bullet Punch into Trick Room into Psychic plus Shadow Ball potentially, putting in some work in the late game alongside Recover. So could have been a thing, but I had the T-Wave there expecting that situation with the Terrakion to happen in the mid game rather than in the late game. Because obviously in the late game, Trick Room is better because you can potentially counter sweep your opponent's team. In the mid game, I was kind of expecting Terrakion to come out, me to go into Reuniclus, and then potentially to switch out to something like Mew, and then getting a T-Wave on that could have been really nice for other mons on my team. As it turned out, that was not the situation, and in the end it would have been better to have Trick Room and to potentially just try and kill the Terrak and bring in something for the Mew. But yeah, it was definitely, we talked about it a lot after the game as to those last couple of turns, because they were quite finicky, I think, for both of us, just trying to me trying to figure out what my outs were, and Evan trying to figure out how he could lock in the win.
Yeah, I think he needed to lock in the win versus the Machamp. So I think his only play was to attack. Because if he set up, then that's leaving him exposed to 2 bullet punches. Or
he lived 2 bullet punches pretty easily. So the bullet punch only did about 30%, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't going to 2-hit KO at that range. So that was why, obviously Bullet Punch is definitely the play if it 2-hit KOs, because, then there's no drawback to it, basically. But, yeah, it didn't 2-hit KO in that situation, and so I was like, there's not really a lot I can do. Bullet Punch doesn't actually get me any closer to a win, it just, gets me slightly closer to killing the Terrakion for differential. Which I ended up doing anyway because of the Rocky Helmet damage, so worked out okay.
Yeah, I got really nothing else to say about your play throughout the match. I have a couple of things about Evan that I can save for later.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, no worries.
Up next, we have the Blackmont Rycougars, coached by Zamcro. Bacon had them at 10, and I had them at 8. Bacon, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, I will just say there is a typo there. That shouldn't be -8 on Scoot's ranking from mine. I think that's a leftover from the week 0 through to week 1 rankings. I don't know what the minus here was for Scoot. I actually think... No, yeah, he would have actually gone up in my rankings this week. I just forgot to change that over. But that said, let's talk about Scoot. We've talked a little bit about him already, because we've already talked about his opponent. And yeah, he was able to pick up a really nice win with the Zard X. Played with it really well, and yeah, got away here with the... in the first 2 weeks, he's tried to do things with Zard X and struggled against Suicune and Alomomola, which are obviously 2 premier kind of really bulky waters with lots of longevity. One of the weaknesses of Finny that I found last season when I had it in Majors is that it doesn't quite have the longevity because it can't, for example, run a rest set because of its own terrain, and it doesn't have regenerator or it doesn't have recover. Um, so it is very reliant on leftovers. He did get a little lucky in that, as we talked about earlier, his opponent just kind of misplayed all around the Zardex to let it set up to +2/+2, and then it was able to just sweep through. But I do think Scoot put himself in a position uh, where he had a pretty good shot to win the game with Zardex, regardless of whether or not he won it at that exact moment of the game. Um, the other thing I was impressed by was that he was able to respond to his opponent's setup pretty well. So yeah, having that response to the Thunderous Tea and being able to say, not only is Zardex able to take a hit, it's also able to threaten you out and potentially win the game with a kind of reverse sweep setup. So that's always really good to see. It's a good way of claiming these big kind of counter sweep wins. And I think there was another instance of setup from his opponent's team, but I can't actually remember what it was off the top of my head. But yeah, he was able to play pretty well and pull out a win. And this is probably more the Scoot that I was expecting to see at the start of the season. He had a really poor start, but hopefully he'll start to pick up and put on a bit more of a show for the rest of the season, because yeah, he had a really good start last season. I think him and Styx were the last undefeated teams. Like they both were like 5-0, I think, or something like that early in the season. And so yeah, we'll see if he can go on a bit of a hot streak again, but this time in the mid-season.
Yeah, like I don't see any reason why he can't go on a hot streak. He has a great team with Serp, Charax, Lando T, Sylveon, and then even has the Trick Room option with Stakataka in the back, which some teams will definitely have to think about. But yeah, I think Scoot covered the game very well, seeing the Adrenaline Orb Necrozma early.
That was the other setup mon that I was thinking of.
Yeah, he was able just to take that out with ease, and then just put himself in a position to win with Charax. Like it was just full on Scoot's match. Like Muse the Best really didn't have anything going for him in that match, and Charizard X is hopefully going to turn Scoot's season around.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's move on to our next team. We have Blitz and the Toronto Tyranitar. This is the biggest differential I think we have this week, and it's only 4 places, so it's not a huge gap. But I had them at number 7. You had them at number 11. Blitz copped his first loss this week, and we've talked a little bit about his opponent already. I did think Blitz's prep here was actually not too bad. Like he had the Shed Shell. So was able to switch out the Kartana from the Magnezone or Magneton, whichever one his opponent had. And then I thought the T-Wave on the Togekiss was also pretty solid prep. But overall, did cop an L. I thought that he played really well last week, and was able to pick up a really solid win in week 2. Hard to necessarily know what to think about Blitz at this point. I think, I totally understand you having him down at 11 because, yeah, he did get very lucky in week 1. But, yeah, I think he's probably in that kind of mid-tier of teams where he's put himself in a position where at 2-1, if he's able to make his play a bit more consistent, he will be able to go pretty far in the season, but he could also fall away from here. And we'll have to see as the season goes on what his baseline is, because, yeah, it's been a very up and down season so far for Blitz. What did you think?
Yeah, I think you touched on most of what I have written down here. The Uber hack set with the T-Wave plus Air Slash from the Togekiss. That's always fun to see. Definitely not for your opponent, but fun to run.
Yep.
I thought the Shed Shell Kartana was very smart prep from Blitz. To not be trapped by the Magneton when you're running something like Scarf or when you can bluff a Scarf is definitely good prep on Blitz's part. I think he fall flat with the Suicune. just given that Rise Pool brought the Taunt and substitute Keldeo. Didn't really switch out the Suicune that often on the Keldeo, maybe just trying to play some pressure mind games with Rise Pool just to maybe lower the PP a little bit. But other than that, I think he didn't really play super well. Just outclassed from a prep standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. Let's move on to our next coach. So this is Will and the San Antonio Sparse. So you might find it a little bit unusual if you haven't watched the games to see a team at 0-2 with -2 differential, ranked my number 8, your number 5. Obviously hasn't played his week 3 game as of this point. But yeah, Will has had 2 losses. Both of them have been 1-0s. Both of them have been pretty desperately unlucky. And, you know, like the first one was just genuinely just luck, and then the second one was a combination of luck and not knowing that Cresselia was on his opponent's roster. I still think this team is really strong. I still think Will can pull out some wins, but it's going to be tough moving into the second half of the season. You know, like, he's going to have to probably get a little bit lucky and, you know, really be on his game in terms of his prep and his play to come back from here. But I think, you know, for the moment, for at least one more week, we've got him in the top half of the rankings, just on the potential of what he could pull out moving forward.
Yeah, like I think Will's just played well. Like he's out prepped and outplayed his opponents, and then just loses to Hack. He's definitely unlucky, and I really hope that his luck turns around later in the season. Because I think Will is a good battler, and definitely shouldn't be in this week with 2 losses.
Yep.
So we'll see what is going on for him in the later weeks.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Moving on. Now we're at Evan, who was both of our number 6. And I had him at the same position as last week, but you moved him down 2 spots. So if you want to talk about Evan first.
I think turn 1, he sacked Mamo. And I definitely didn't agree with that play. Just because you had Empoleon, Shaman, and Circuitry, which Mamoswine could really put offensive pressure against. I think that was the main reason why I moved him down, is that he maybe played... he sacked a WinCon too early, whereas like you still had most of those threats around that could pivot around his Terrakion or his other Pokemon. So I think it was just a mistake early that maybe moved him down a couple. I think he still played well throughout. But overall, I think just that play is something that's stuck with me.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. And again, it's another play that Evan and I talked about afterwards, and he said that, you know, realistically, if he was going to stay in, he should have been clicking Earthquake there, because that way at least the Machamp wouldn't have been a threat later in the game, because it would have been, you know, at very little health. I mean, I was quite a bulky Machamp. I had max HP and I want to say like 176 defense or something like that, but I still would have taken, you know, well over 50% from Earthquake, as opposed to the, you know, whatever it was, like 20% or 15% or whatever it was I took from Knockoff, which meant that I still had a really healthy Machamp that threatened Evan's team. So I think, yeah, like he really had 2 options there. One of them was to switch out to preserve the Mamoswine for later, and the other one was to get a huge chunk of damage off onto the onto the Machamp, or the third option would have been to at least go for rocks to threaten my team. I don't think he had rocks on the set, given that he got up the rocks later with Metagross, but yeah, if you're going to lead off with Mamoswine in that situation, I feel like those are kind of the 3 things that you could do with it, and he kind of chose none of them. And yeah, that definitely put a lot of pressure on Evan's team, and he was able to respond to it pretty well, which I think, is kind of a sign of a coach that's feeling pretty confident in his team. And I do think, actually, this was probably his best performance so far. Like, obviously, copped the loss week 1, and then he did get a win last week, but I did think he got a little bit lucky in his week 2 game. So, I thought this was a solid win in a pretty solid battle that didn't have much hacks either way. So, yeah, definitely belongs in the top half, and I expect to see him come playoffs, but probably could improve a little bit more to really get up into that top 3 or 4 coaches.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely comfortable, and that's definitely good to feel about your team. So if he's comfortable, he should be able to turn it around and do quite well for the rest of the season.
Yep. All right, let's move on to number 5. So this is the Miami Marlins, coached by Tone. I have them at 5. You have them at 6. Tone is 2-0. Hasn't played his week 3 game, as we talked about earlier when we were talking about Will. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about Tone's week 2 game, because he did get a win, and in the end, there was some really good prep there, and the Embor put in so much work, but risking Ferrothorn turn 1 against the Tornadus T just seemed like such a weird play to me, and I do think the team remains a little bit defensively vulnerable. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that week 2 game, but I decided not to move him. I didn't move his position from week 2 to week 3 because obviously he hasn't played that game, so I decided to leave him and Will where they were and just move coaches around them. But yeah, we'll see how Tone goes. I thought his week 1 performance was really good. I thought his week 2 performance was shaky, but he did pick up the win. I mean, he's 2-0 plus 5. He's in a really good position to push for playoffs from here. But we'll see how consistent his play is throughout the season.
Yeah, so I just moved him down because we have other coaches that I think filled those upper spots, so that's the only reason why I kind of shifted around the way I did.
Yep.
But he got so lucky in that week 2 game.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think he's played well throughout the season and should be able to make playoffs if he continues his current trajectory.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move on because we don't have too much to talk about with Tone. So at number 4, we have the Oakland A's Elves, coached by Psychedelic Scissor. I moved these guys up to number 3 this week. You moved them up to number 4, having had them at number 8 in week 2. I really rate Sykes' performance so far this season. I think he's either matched his win total from last season. Yeah, I think he's actually matched his win total from last season already. He was either on he was somewhere between 2 and 4 wins for the entirety of last season, and he's already 3-0. Got a little bit lucky this week, but I just think this team is really well balanced. I think Aegislash is a ridiculous Pokemon, and Psyche is showing that he can really use it well, which is a crucial thing with him on Aegislash. I think a lot of those kind of slower top tier threats, it very much comes down to how good you are at using it. I think we're seeing with Psyche and also with Owen using the Mega Mawile that we've got 2 coaches who really know how to take advantage of those things, and yeah, it's making this team really hard to stop. I didn't have too much to say about his game this week. I did want to make a note about his game last week. That was just something I noticed that was really clever about his team, is the way that he has Aegislash to block Rapid Spin, and then Braviary with the potential for Defiant to punish Defog. So that's a really clever combination in combination with the fact that there's a Rabombi and a Garbodor and some good rockers to hazard stack, and then to really punish any form of removal that his opponent can bring. I think I really rate the squad. I think Psyche's gonna have a really good season from this point on.
Yeah, like Psych, to go off what you said from him last season, I think he was 3-7 minus 16.
Mm.
So it's definitely nice to see him turn it around. Um, he definitely had great prep this week. He had the Koba Berry on Infernape
Hmm.
to, I believe, deal with Crobat, I think, a little bit. So, or maybe it was maybe on Tangrowth that brought Aerial Ace. I
Mm.
forget what the situation was, but it allowed the Infernape to take the hit and then get the KO in return. The like bringing Rocky Helmet Aegislash is something that I haven't really seen before, even just on the ladder.
Hmm.
Um, it's definitely interesting to see the different amount of sets that Psyche has come up with Aegislash throughout the season so far.
Hmm.
And I really liked Scarf Crook to secure the win in the late game. Uh, but yeah, like I think overall, Psyche played quite well and maybe played with a little hacks on his side.
Hmm.
But other than that, I think Psyche has the options to do quite well for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he got a slightly lucky crit with pursuit on the crocodile to get rid of the Alomomola, but the fact that he put himself in a position where he could actually make that play, and depending on the Alomomola set, I think it was only because it was so defensively bulky that the crit actually mattered. So, yeah, it was he made the right decisions in prep, and he made the right decisions in game, and then he got a little bit lucky because he was up against a very well prepped opposing team and a very well coached opposing team. But yeah, he was able to pull out the win. He was able to put himself in a position where he looked like he could win, which I think is really important against good teams because then you give yourself the opportunity for something to go your way, and that's what you need to do. If you feel like you're outclassed in a matchup by your opposing coach or by the opposing team, at least try and facilitate a situation where if one move goes your way or if your opponent makes one wrong prediction, you can potentially have an out to win the game. Um, so yeah, and I thought Syke did that really well this week, and yeah, I decided to reward him, moving him up to number 3. And we'll talk now about your number 3 and my number 4, which is Volume and the Arizona Dactyls, who are also 3-0. I thought Volume, yeah, did what he needed to do this week, picked up the win. Probably the only reason I've moved him down. Obviously, he's had 3 pretty compelling performances. He's picked up very solid wins. I am a little concerned about the lack of variety in terms of what he's bringing. He's bought the same 7 Mons all 3 weeks. So we haven't seen things like Frostlass or Chinchino or even the Galvantula at all so far this season. And so, yeah, I do think that that's potentially a problem moving forward. And I worry that if he's not comfortable with some of those other Mons, then he's not going to be able to bring them in matchups where maybe they can put in some work. And that will make it a lot harder for him to beat teams in matchups where maybe the sand isn't as good, or he can't rely on Clefable and Amoonguss to defensively pressure things. Whether that means he should make some transactions moving forward to potentially bring in some lower tier stuff that he's a bit more comfortable with, or that has a bit more um, potential to actually come to games, I don't know. But yeah, obviously we're at the top end of the power rankings now. There's not that much to critique for a team that's 3-0 plus 9. But I do worry a little bit when you're only bringing pretty much the same teams, week in, week out, that you may struggle a little bit in the later part of the season.
Yeah, like I don't think I'm super concerned about what he's not bringing. Um, I don't think Galvantula or Frostlass or Chinchino are really good options over something like an Excadrill or a T-Tar or even a Clefable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They don't really have the bulk, but I think from the 11 Mons, he's brought 8 I think me and Chow and Amoongus have been swapping weeks throughout. I think the only critique I had of Volume's play is I think he could have maybe got one more differential versus Henry
Hmm.
in the reverse sweep that Henry was trying to get with Crawdont.
Hmm.
I think if he didn't sack for Alligator, he could have brought in Char Y and allowed that to take the hit and then go into the Latios to win the game.
Yeah,
So I think he maybe lost.
I assume what he was thinking there was that I don't know what his Feraligatr set was, but potentially he lived a +1 knock, and he was hoping to live that and carry back and then not have to sack Zard Y. So I guess in trying to preserve a point of differential, he actually ended up costing himself a point of differential. But yeah, I don't know what his Feraligatr set was, such that it couldn't take that hit, or whether there is any Feraligatr set that could have taken that hit. I actually don't know. Haven't run the calcs.
Yeah, like I think just overall, Volume has been playing very, very well to begin games, but then I think begins to doubt himself maybe in the later games.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's what's costing him maybe one or two differential. I think we saw that even versus I think he played you in
Yeah,
week one
in week one, yeah,
or week two,
that was week
where
one, yeah.
he sacked a couple of things
Mm.
so that he could get like the 2-0 win instead of a 4-0. I forget what the
Yeah, it
matchup
was
what the game ended.
Yeah, he actually what his mistake against me was actually trying to preserve a 4-0 and potentially losing himself the game. So I think you're right in terms of your overall point about him potentially losing a little bit of focus in the late game and not necessarily having a confident finish. But yeah, it was kind of the opposite problem against me. But yeah, I think you're onto something there. His early game has been very strong. His he was able to. This was a 6-3 at one point. Before the Crawdon was able to begin pulling things back a bit. But yeah, his methods to finish off games have been a little bit shaky, and that's probably the only thing stopping him from being in the top two, really, at this point. As well as the fact that our top two coaches have performed really well. Speaking of which, let's move on to our number two. He's moved down, finally, been dethroned, which is Owen and the Leinster Latias. Both of us have Owen at number two. Copped his first loss this week. Not a huge amount to say from my end in terms of criticism. He did get a bit unlucky with crit on the Aloma Mola, and I want to say there was a para or something on one of his other mons that hurt. And obviously those things are unfortunate, but it was a solid game. I do think to some extent Psych had the exact right squad because Owen's team might be a little bit predictable. Or at least what he's brought so far has been a little bit predictable. But that said, Owen's team might be slightly predictable, but people seem to not be predicting it. I don't know if people just aren't watching his games, but he's brought Immunity Snorlax every single time, and every single time he's brought it, someone has tried to click Toxic on it. And I don't understand why people keep doing this. So this is my shout out to every coach in Majors. Stop clicking Toxic on Owen's Snorlax. I guess if you do that, he will probably bring Gluttony or Thick Fat, and then he'll destroy you. But come on guys, at least think about the possibility. That's my rant for the week. But yeah, overall I think Owen's doing really well. I don't think this loss will bother him too much, and I think he'll move forward pretty well from here. What did you have in terms of comments about Owen?
There was one turn where he missed a Leaf Storm with Tangrowth against the Cresselia.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that was crucial because...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He needed that damage on Cress for the Zorora, was it?
Yeah, the Zero Aura. It was a bulk up Zero Aura. If he got that damage, I think he could have defeated Psych from that point with the Zero Aura.
Yep.
I think the main fault was that crit on an Alola Mola. That was definitely damage that like he wasn't able to wish pass anymore.
Yeah.
So that definitely allowed Psych to get the upper hand, as Owen wasn't allowed to heal up his other mons as well.
Yeah, it was doubly bad too because he was switching out having just clicked Wish, I believe. And so not only did it mean that the Alomomola died and wasn't able to come back in later with a little bit of regenerator health, it also meant that Wish didn't activate because of the mechanics of Pursuit. And yeah, that was really, really painful for Owen. So I think even more so than the Alomomola dying was the fact that that Wish wasn't able to be passed into one of his other mons. So yeah, it was a bit unfortunate, and yeah, I thought overall he still played pretty well, put himself in a position to win at various points, but this week he was up against another coach who's in good form and got a little bit lucky. So, it's going to happen in some matchups, but yeah, as I said, not too concerned about Owen.
Yeah, no, like he should definitely be able to turn it around and pull out a couple of more wins.
Yep. So that leaves us with only one coach left. You know who it is. It's Styx. It's the Duke Blue Dwebbles. They're at number 1, 3-0, plus 10. Yeah, Styx played really well. Not really too much to say. I thought he respected the threats on his opponent's team and played pretty conservatively, which I actually like to see. If you're you're already 2-0, you've already got good differential. I don't think there was necessarily a reason to try and stunt and get a 6-0 every week. And yeah, in the end, the proof is in the pudding, and he's 3-0 plus 10. It doesn't look like at the moment like there's many teams that are capable of stopping Styx. So we'll see, especially with Owen in the other conference. So I don't know if they play during the season. I don't know if that's one of his out of conference games, but that'll be a good matchup to watch either in the regular season or potentially in playoffs later down the line. But yeah, at the moment it's gonna be interesting to see if anyone can knock Styx off. I knocked him off last season, but that was after he'd already screwed up his undefeated season, and so I don't think he was trying too hard. Maybe I'll be able to do it again, but I don't know about that. This team is real strong, and I think he was initially in his draft analysis a little uncomfortable with it, but I think at this point he seems to be very comfortable with the team that he has and is playing really, really well.
Yeah, like I don't know what there's to be uncomfortable with. This team is probably one of the best I have seen come out of a draft format. He's got threats across all of the speed tiers. Like even Kofagrigus could be an offensive Pokemon with Nasty Plot and still have the bulk to have that longevity.
Yep.
Yeah, no, like he just played well. I think it was maybe a little interesting that he didn't really have anything on Jirachi for Mega Venusaur. I think he opted to click Iron Head instead of having a coverage move like Zen Headbutt. I think that was the only thing that I saw that was interesting from the match from Styx's perspective. I also liked that, just to bring up Carson one more time, to immortalize the APA Bunnelby by bringing that Heat Diggersby set. So overall, I think this was a good match. It was definitely one to watch. I think it was just played well by both coaches, other than that turn 1 mistake by Carson. That really turned the tide in Styx's favor.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think that's about all we have. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, drop a comment. I think our rankings are probably looking a little bit more steady now. So, but if you do still have feedback on them and you think that we've slandered your team or your name as a coach, then please do let us know. But yeah, aside from that, hope you all have a good week, and we will see you next time.